Hey guys, if you want to get into filmmaking, start creating your own cool visual effects and motion graphics, and you don't want to spend a cent, then HitFilm Express is likely your best option. Almost 2 years ago, I created an absolute beginner tutorial for how to use HitFilm Express. I still get a ton of questions on this old video, especially now that HitFilm Express 2017 has been out for a couple of months and the versions are just a little bit different. Also, I feel that I didn't cover some topics well enough, like how to work with audio and how to work with text and create animated titles. So it's time for a do-over, and in this tutorial I want to show you how to get and use HitFilm Express 2017 for free. First off, if at any point in time you want to jump to a specific topic in this tutorial, I'm going to put timestamps down into the video description, so make sure to check that out and then you can simply jump to the part of the video that is most relevant to you. Now let's first talk about how you can get HitFilm Express 2017 for free. To download the installer for macOS or for Windows, simply pop open your favorite web browser and go to hitfilm.com/express. Then click on the button that says, and I imagine this being set in Arnie voice, "Let's do this." At the bottom of the next page, you should find a big blue link that says Get HitFilm Express Free, and since that's exactly what we're here to do, let's click on that. You will be asked to create a new free account if you don't already have one, so fill in your details, and then at the bottom of the page, simply click on the link that says Send me the download. Once you receive the email with the link, and do allow for a little bit of time for this to happen, this may not be instantaneous, simply follow the link to download the relevant installer for your operating system and then install HitFilm Express 2017 on your computer. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of how to install software in your computer. That's just going to lead us down a rabbit hole, and I will assume that you know how to do that already. If you do need technical assistance though, do reach out to the HitFilm team. They're always happy to help you out. Also, make sure that you install HitFilm Express and don't accidentally get yourself the demo version of HitFilm Pro. HitFilm Pro is the paid version of HitFilm. It's not free, it's got a lot of advanced features, and if you are interested, I've got a full comparison video on my channel, and again, the link for that is going to be down below. Once you've got everything installed, simply launch HitFilm Express 2017 and sign in with the free account that you created earlier. And that's it. We're now all set up and ready to go. When you launch HitFilm Express, the first thing you will see is the home screen. Over on the right hand side you will find recent announcement, right now there's a sale going on, as well as a large number of different tutorials. You can simply click on these, they're links, they take you through to YouTube and you can check out their tutorials and follow along, learn all about some of the really cool features in HitFilm. Over on the left hand side you will find a list of add-on packs. Because HitFilm Express is the free version of HitFilm, you don't get all of the cool advanced features that you will find in the Pro version. However, you can purchase individual add-on packs to add certain types of effects like destruction or film looks or repair tools or tracking or 3D objects into HitFilm in the form of add-on packs. These range from $15 to $50 depending on what they add, and if you're interested, go check them out and you can always add them to HitFilm Express at any point in time. Right above the add-on packs you'll find a link that takes you through to the user guide, and more importantly, just above that, buttons to either create a new project or open an existing one. Because we haven't created anything yet, let's simply click on New. This is going to bring up the project panel where you can configure your project settings. At the very top you can simply select a pre-made template, and if you pop this up, there's a whole lot of different options, everything from Instagram, which is square, to 720p, all the way through to 4K Ultra HD at 100 frames per second. Now we're not going to go quite that crazy, so I'm just going to come up and select 1080p Full HD, maybe we're going to go with 24 frames per second. And you will notice that selecting this template already filled out most of these fields, so width and height is 1920 by 1080 pixels, which is 1080p Full HD, frame rate is 24 frames per second, and my pixel aspect ratio has been set to square. Now, pixel aspect ratio actually refers to the fact that depending on the camera you use to film your footage, sometimes the pixels aren't actually square, they're more long than they are tall, but all of the footage I'm going to use I know has square pixels, which is usually the norm. Usually pixels are square. Then under audio settings you can change your sample rate, which determine the quality of your audio. I'm simply going to leave this at 48 kHz or 48,000 Hz. And down here in the rendering options there's a few important settings that determine and influence the quality of the video once you export it. For one, there's anti-aliasing. Anti-aliasing is a technique used for smoothing out jagged edges, especially along diagonal lines. The higher you set your multisampling, so MSAA stands for multi-sample anti-aliasing, if you set this to 32 times, your computer has a whole lot more calculations to go through when you're rendering your video. Yes, it's going to further reduce jagged edges, but it's going to go a whole lot slower. So usually I leave this on default by 4 times. And then you can change the shadow map size, which is used to determine the quality of shadows that you get in your scene when you're working with 3D and lights. Once you're happy with your settings, you have 2 options. You can either start compositing or you can start editing. Now, editing is usually what you want to start out with. It essentially allows you to organize your media and create a consecutive sequence of clips that kind of makes sense. Video compositing is actually more for visual effects, for layering different visual elements on top of each other. We're going to touch on both of these in this tutorial. But for now, we just want to start off with the basics. So simply click on Start Editing. This now is going to drop us into the main workspace of HitFilm, and right now, because we chose to start editing, we are in the editor timeline. But before we start touching anything, let's just go through the interface elements one by one. Over on the left hand side, you will find the media panel. The media panel is where you import all of your videos, your images, your music and your sound effects into. You can organize them and arrange them, and from here you can then pick pieces and drop them off onto your editor timeline to create your actual movie. In this panel itself, you will find a number of different tabs. Right now, I'm literally on the media tab. So you'll find a tab for effects where you can select video and audio effects. There's also a tab for controls, which will show options to change whatever element you have selected on your timeline. There's a history to undo and redo all of your changes. So you can jump back 10 steps, 20 steps if you accidentally changed something that you didn't want to. And then there's a text tab where you can change any font that you've placed on your image. Let's click back to the media panel, and now let's look at the trimmer. The trimmer allows you to essentially pick small pieces out of a long clip and drop them directly into your editor timeline. We are going to do this in a minute. Just imagine you have a clip that's 30 minutes long and you only want to use 10 seconds out of that clip. You could drop that whole clip onto your editor timeline and try to find the bits and pieces that you want and then cut them out and delete all the bits that you don't want. And if that sounds messy, it's because it is. The easier way is to simply drop that long piece of footage into the trimmer, select the in and out points to define which snippet of that long clip you actually want to use, and then from the trimmer just bring just that piece into your editor timeline. If that's still a little bit confusing, don't worry, we'll get to that in a minute. Next, on the bottom right, you will find your editor timeline. And this is where you actually arrange all of your clips, your music and your audio effects to actually build your edit, your actual film project. In this editor timeline, obviously you have a timeline and you have a little playhead, a little timeline indicator that you actually can click on the head and drag through, or you can actually press space to play this back, but because there's nothing in here now, you won't actually see anything. You can press space again to stop playing back. So this is essentially the timeline that we're going to build up. It contains of a number of video and audio tracks, and we're going to talk about how to add more of these in just a minute. So just know that this is the actual container that contains all of your visual elements to align and arrange your video project. Over on the left hand side of the editor timeline, you will find a whole bunch of different tools for selecting, editing, cutting, moving your clips, ripple deleting it, and at the bottom there's 2 icons which are right now grayed out to actually export your video and turn it into a video file. Let's make sure we still have the selection tool selected, and now let's talk about your viewer or your preview panel. In here you will always see exactly what is under your current timeline indicator, and right now, because we have nothing in our editor timeline, this just shows you a black and white, or right now a black and gray image, which just tells you there's nothing here. It's essentially just transparent because you have nothing in our timeline. So just know this is where we're going to see the actual image. At the very bottom right, you will find your meters, and this is just showing you the audio level. So as you're playing back your video, you want to make sure that your audio doesn't clip, that it doesn't, turn distorted because it's too loud or it's too soft. So the meters does give you an indicator. It's just like a volume bar that shows you exactly how loud your video is as you're playing it back. Now, with all of these panels, the cool thing is you can undock all of these panels in any way that you want. In order to do that, for example, the meters, you can simply right-click onto the panel name and say Float Panel. This is going to disconnect this panel. You now have a floating. You can place it anywhere on a different screen or anywhere else on your interface. And if you select the actual name and drag that over the other panels, you can see you can actually dock it into these other panels. So for example, I could say I want the meters, for example, on the left side of my trimmer. And you can just let go. And that now docked the meters on the left side of the trimmer into this panel on my top left. Now, there are some additional windows and additional features available in HitFilm Express that aren't currently visible, and in order to bring them up, come up to the main menu bar, to this little square here, the 9 squares, click on that, and in here you can see we've got the controls, effects, history, meters, and the trimmer enabled, but there's also an audio mixer, so let's click that and enable the audio mixer. And that will bring up the audio mixer that actually allows you to change the volume of all of your audio tracks and kind of control the final mix of your audio in your video project. Let's bring up the window options again, disable the audio mixer, and let's enable the processor. This one is usually going to look pretty empty. The only time you see items in this processor tab is when you're creating proxies or placeholders for very large video files. But again, this is probably not a topic for this tutorial. Let's close the processor again, and again, just come to this little window tab, disable the processor. The last panel is the track panel, and this allows you to motion track your footage, which I'm really happy to see that this is actually available in HitFilm Express. And I have a separate tutorial on my channel that explains how this works. In this one, we're not going to touch on it. And finally, once you're done messing up your interface and everything is kind of rearranged and you don't know what's where anymore, you can simply come up into the main menu, click on this little workspace icon, and down here at the bottom you can say reset my layout, and that will simply reset everything to the default settings, and everything is back to nice and clean. Now that you know what is what, let's talk about how to actually import your media into HitFilm Express. As I've mentioned, we are going to import all of our files into the media panel in the bottom left corner. Let's just grab the right side of this media panel and drag it over to the right a little bit to make this panel just a little bit bigger. And you now have 3 different ways to import your media into your project. First, quite obviously, at the top of the media panel, you will find this little import button, so you can click on that. This is going to bring up a file dialog, and then you simply navigate to wherever you have your media located on your hard drive. These can either be videos or images or audio files, and HitFilm Express does support a pretty large number of common file formats. If you do want to know what file types you can actually import into HitFilm Express, in this import dialog at the bottom right, you'll see this all supported media pop-up. You can just bring this up and check out. So AVIs, images, MPEGs, QuickTime, WAV, and Windows Media kind of out of the window here. So it's quite a large number of different files. Note that not all file types are supported, and if your file is not supported because it doesn't actually match any of these extensions, you may have to convert it to a more common format. By the way, if you do want to follow along, head over to surfacestudio.com/downloads. I'm going to make most of the files that I use in this tutorial available for you to download. Obviously, I encourage you to just use your own video file and your own music clips and images. It'll just be so much more fun. But if you don't have anything and you just want to follow along, this is surfacestudio.com/download, and you can just download them for free and use them, and hopefully it'll make it nice and easy for you. For now, I'm simply going to select Walter Garage 1, hold down Control, Walter Garage 2 and 3, maybe Explosion Far and this grunge image here, maybe also the horror loop, and then simply hit Open. This is going to import all of my files into the project and drop them in the project panel. Interestingly enough, you'll see that my Explosion Far wave actually shows me a file error. And I'm not quite sure whether this is just because HitFilm doesn't support this particular file format, or maybe the file is corrupted. So I'm just going to select this file and press delete to just delete it from my media panel. But everything else seems to have gotten in here just fine. Now, as you import more and more media into this media panel, it's going to get a bit messy unless you start organizing things. So at the bottom here, you've got a little button for creating a new folder. So let's just create a new folder. Let's call this one Footage. And I'm going to select my Walter Garage 1, 2, and 3 clips. Just kind of drag them up and drop them into the footage folder. And I just held down Shift to select all of them. Let's collapse this. Grunge JPEG is an image file. It's just kind of a bit of a grunge image that we're going to overlay onto our video. Let's just create a new folder for that as well. Let's call this one Images and drop the grunge JPEG into that. And obviously horror loop.mp3, that's a sound effect. So maybe I'll call this one Music because that's actually a music clip. And it shows me the duration here as well. So this is 42 seconds long at 48 kilohertz. So I'm just going to drag and drop this into my music folder and collapse that as well. So everything is just nice and clean. If you don't want to click onto this import button, you can also just double click into this media panel. It's going to pop open the file dialog. And maybe I'll select Walter 4 and 5 and 6. Maybe I'll also select the cinematic guitar loop. And I'm reselecting the explosion file. I just want to see whether it imports the second time around. Let's hit open. And all of those files are starting to get loaded into the project. And there they are. Now, I don't think Explosion Far Wave is going to work. There's some file error. I may have to convert this first. But I just wanted to show you some of the issues that you may encounter when you work with HitFilm Express, because again, it just depends so much on the files you're using and their file type and whether there's any other issues with those. So again, just going to select it and delete it. Cinematic guitar loop goes into music. Collapse that, Walter, 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 select all of those, again just drop them into the footage and collapse that, and we've imported a whole nother batch of media. My favorite way of getting my media into HitFilm Express though is to simply bring up an Explorer window or a Finder window if I'm on a Mac, and then simply select the elements I want to bring in, like it's a bomb, text overlay PNG, I don't think I have yet either. Let's bring in this fire.mov, simply drag and drop them directly into your media panel and let go. And HitFilm will simply import them into your project. Let's again drag the video files into the footage folder, collapse that. The image goes into the images folder and again collapse that. Now the last thing, again, I've got a file here called thewhat.vop, which really is just an invalid file. If you try to drop something invalid into HitFilm Express, it'll simply tell you I can't actually import this because it won't know what this is. And you won't be able to open it up in the file browser anyways. So just be aware, HitFilm doesn't support everything, and again, you may just have to convert it. HitFilm doesn't like it. So now that's cool. We've got a whole bunch of music, images, and footage in our media folder, but we still don't have anything at all. Somehow we're seeing an image up here in the trimmer, and I'm not quite sure what's going on. Well, the trimmer will actually just show you the last item that you had selected in your media panel. If I select It's a Bomb clip, the trimmer will change to the It's a Bomb clip. If I select this grunge image, I now see the grunge image in my trimmer. If I select one of the music clips, well, it hasn't selected and I can see the waveform. But just know that the trimmer just shows you the last element that you had selected, and I'm going to talk about how to use the trimmer in a minute. The easiest way now to actually use the media that we've imported into our project is simply to take one of these clips. Let's take Walter Garage 01.mp4 and drag and drop it directly into your editor timeline. It's going to show you a little green bar, which is the clip, and it has actually 2 layers. When you let go, HitFilm will actually do a quick check to see whether your editor timeline settings, so all of the settings we configured in our project settings, match the clip that we've dropped in. If it does not, HitFilm Express will pop open this message saying the editor sequence settings differ to the clip you are adding. Do you want to change them to match the clip you're adding, or are you happy with the current project settings? And again, this is just up to you whether you want to match the clip or you just want to stay with the project settings that you've configured. I'm quite happy with my project settings, and I think the only thing that doesn't actually match is that my frames per second, I can see here on the left, is actually 23.976, and we configured it to be 24. So maybe I'm just going to go with yes to say, yes, match my editor timeline. There you go. And we still can't see anything in our preview window. And that is because the timeline indicator that we have here isn't actually over a visual element in our editor timeline. So the moment I drag this over my clip, there's my video. And now I can scrub through, or I can press space to play this back. Let's hit space again to stop this. Right now, my clip is really small on the timeline. If I'm looking at the seconds here and move the cursor to the very end, this is actually 30 seconds long, but it's really tiny on this timeline. In order to scale up my timeline, in the tracks panel, in the very bottom here, you'll find this little scroll bar. You can bring this up to the right to kind of scale up or down your timeline. So I'm just going to scale this up just a little bit so I see a little bit more of the details and get a bit more control over my actual clip. 30 seconds, however, is still pretty long, and we really don't want all of this clip because there's a lot of outtakes in this shot. And for exactly this situation, the trimmer can come in really handy. Rather than dragging the entirety of our clip into our editor timeline, let's select this clip. So you can either click and drag a marquee selection around it, or just select the clip and press delete to wipe it from your timeline. And let's use the trimmer to pick just a small section of that clip out of it before we drop it into the timeline. Remember that the trimmer will always show you the clip that you have selected in your media panel, or well, technically the last clip you had selected. So let's select Walter Garage 01.mp4, and you can see it right here in the trimmer. And at the bottom of the trimmer, you'll find a little timeline scroller as well. It kind of looks like a progress bar, but you can actually click and drag to preview this clip and try to find the section of this clip that you want to use. So let's start to move the trimmer to the point where we want to start. So maybe right here where Walter is walking towards the left, right there is maybe when I want to start. I don't care about anything that's on the left side of this. So I'm going to set an in point at this position. For that, over on the left hand side, you'll find a little arrow pointing to the right, and this is set in point, or you can press I on your keyboard to set this in point. And you can see that the left side has now been trimmed off. It's just going to be ignored. let's scrub forward a little bit to maybe about there. I don't want to, again, don't need all these second and third and fourth takes over on the right hand side. So just about there. And let's set an out point here. Again, over on the left hand side, you'll find a little arrow pointing to the right as in an out point. So let's click that. And now we only have this little middle section highlighted here. And this is now our range that we've essentially trimmed this clip to. In order to only drop this piece of this clip into our edit timeline, simply click and drag directly onto the preview in your trimmer and drag it and drop it directly into your timeline. Let's zoom in a little bit and come over to the left hand side and let's reset our timeline. Let's just play this back. And you will see that this is actually the trimmed out part of this original source clip. So hopefully you can see how the trimmer is really, really useful to pick only the best pieces of your media to drop directly into your editor timeline. And this is really useful, especially when you're dealing with very, very long video files. Just pick out those really nice snippets that you actually want to keep, and then you can just discard the rest. Let's quickly repeat the process with the next clip. Let's select Walter Garage 02.mp4. Again, it's going to show up in the trimmer. Let's find some nice in and out points. Again, I just want a little bit of footage of Walter's feet as he's walking. So let's set an in point, go forward a little bit, maybe to right about there. Press O to set an out point. And I highly encourage you learn all of the shortcuts. It's just going to make your life so much easier. Let's simply click into the trimmer and drag the clip into the editor timeline. And it's going to snap right here to the end. So I kind of want one clip to follow the other. And because this is just a little bit too large now, let's just zoom out a little bit again. So now it's going to follow from this clip to that clip, which obviously doesn't make sense right now, but we're just picking the pieces we want to keep, and then we're going to look at the editing in just a little bit. Let's select Walter Garage 03, and again, just going to pick a nice in and out point for it, and drag and drop that into the editor timeline. And I'm not going for perfection here, I really just want to show you the basics, so I'm just going to pick a clip from Walter Garage 05, and again, I'm just kind of going to grab a small snippet of this clip, set an in and an out point, and drag that into my editor timeline just to kind of finish this off on this really wide shot of Walter looking around the garage all confused. And now let's talk about how you can actually use all of the editing capabilities of HitFilm to turn all of this into something that's just a little bit more engaging and fun. Now, so far all I've shown you is that you can select a clip and press delete to delete it. Obviously, you can simply click onto any of these clips and drag them around your timeline and drop them to wherever you want, so you can swap clips out just by dragging them and rearranging them around. You can also click onto the sides of your clips, drag them out to extend them or bring them in, so you kind of trim the clips further. And again, in the preview window, it's going to give you a little preview of what the exact point is you're going to trim it to. If you've created gaps between your videos rather than selecting everything behind it and pulling it to the left, you can simply right click into these gaps and select Ripple Delete Gap. That's going to delete the gap and just pull everything from the right side in. Can do this again onto this other one here. And if you can't click into a gap, it's just because there's too little space. So let's just zoom in a little bit, and now I can right click and Ripple Delete that gap as well. And obviously over on the left hand side of the editor timeline, you'll find a whole bunch of editing tools. So we've got the selection tool right now, allows you to click and move things around or adjust the sides. Then you've got the drag tool, which allows you to click and drag to move your timeline around. And this is really useful if you're a little bit zoomed in, so you just want to kind of scooch over a little bit to see the clip on the right side. So I use it a lot for that. And the most important tool in your editing toolbox is probably the slice tool. This allows you to click and cut through your clips. So I can go to the beginning here. Let's say I wanted to cut right here and insert a clip of the feet. Let's just zoom in a little bit more. So right here, for example, I can create a new cut, move forward a little bit to maybe about here, create a new cut, return to the selection tool, select this little clip in the middle and press delete to delete it. Let's come over to the right hand side and find a small section of just the feet walking, and I can actually press H to turn to the hand tool, go over to the right and drag this just a little bit, and let's find a clip that I want maybe about here. Press C for the slice tool. Again, you can just select it from the toolbox itself, but I like to use the shortcut keys, so C for the slice tool. Then let's cut a small section out, maybe just about that. Let's delete the clip at the beginning, let's delete the clip at the end. Press H and let's drag a little bit to the left. press V for the selection tool. I'm just going to grab this little clip here, this little section of the feet walking, and drag them over right into the middle of these two clips. And so now I've got this little clip here of Walter walking, then you can see his feet, and then it cuts back to Walter walking. And yes, I know, this is actually a pretty ugly edit. It's a little bit too short and it doesn't really fit in. But I just wanted to show you the basics of how to use these tools. You can obviously do whatever you want with whatever footage you're working with to cut this together in any way that makes you feel happy. And of course, you can also use some of the advanced editing tools that I'm not going to cover in this tutorial, like the slip and the slide tool, the ripple edit tool, and the roll edit tool. Personally, I do use these a lot myself. Just read up on them. They're really useful and they're not too difficult to use either. One of the more useful ones is probably the rate stretch tool, because this allows you to slow down or speed up your clips. So let's select that one. And in order to rate stretch a clip, you can now, with the rate stretch tool selected, simply click on the end of this clip and drag it out to extend the clip, but rather than adding more content to it, it's actually just going to slow it down. So now this clip actually plays in slow motion. In order to speed it up, you can simply bring in the right side and kind of crunch this clip and make it shorter so it plays back much, much quicker. So now if I rewind and play this back, now that might be a little bit too quick. Let's just extend it just a little bit more. Can you see how this plays back much quicker because I've rate stretched it? So I kind of scrunched the time together. So again, you can have a lot of fun with this tool. If you have accidentally sped up or slowed down one of the clips on your timeline, you're like, oh my god, how do I get it back? You can simply right click onto the clip, come up into speed and duration, and in here it'll actually tell you the current speed of the clip, and you can simply reset this to 100%. Duration will normalize as well, and if you hit OK, this is just going to snap back to the original speed that this clip was at. So, you know, that's kind of how you can save them. Now, one thing you may not have noticed, let me just drag this up just a little bit, is that both the video track as well as the audio track on each of my clips has a little horizontal line. If I'm on the selection tool, I can either come up into the menu, go to the selection tool, or press V for the selection tool. You can actually click and drag this line down, and on a video layer, this line represents the opacity. So as I drag this down, the clip starts becoming more and more transparent. So it's kind of fading out and fading back in. On the audio track, this controls the volume. So if an audio track for my video is just too loud, I can simply drag this line down to make this audio softer. So you can easily control the audio volume on all of these individual clips just by dragging this line down. You can obviously control the opacity, which right now doesn't make much sense because there's nothing under this layer to show through. It just becomes transparent. And if you render this, this would just become black. So let's just leave the opacity at 100, but we can bring the audio volume down just a little bit. Now, another useful thing is that by default, your audio and your video track are linked, so you can't move one without moving the other. You also can't extend one without extending the other, which means you can't actually create L or J cuts, which is where either the video hangs over the audio or the audio hangs over the video. They create really natural cuts, and again, I have a video on my channel that explains why you would want to use them and how you would want to use them. If you want to create them in HitFilm or you just want to have a little bit more control, you can right click onto any of these clips and simply select Unlink to unlink the video and the audio. And now you can actually drag and modify both the audio and the video track independently. This can also be useful if your audio doesn't seem to quite sync up with the video. You can kind of cut them up and align them again and just kind of make it work as best as you can. If you don't want to do that, you can select both clips again on top of each other, right click and select link to relink those two clips, and now again it's just one video layer with an audio track underneath. At the bottom in your editor timeline, you will also find a master channel and master audio track, which is essentially a sum of all of the audio layers you have in your project. And again, it's got this little horizontal bar, and you can click on that and drag it down to either make your entire movie a silent movie essentially, or kind of have, you know, just adjust the volume so these meters shouldn't be clipping. If these meters on the right hand side are going into the red, means your audio is too loud, so you may want to tweak that down a little bit or tweak the clips so you don't get this horrible distorted sound when you export your video. Now by default, HitFilm Express will give you one video track and one audio track, but you're in no way limited to that. You can simply right click onto the tracks window. So let's right click onto this video track here and simply select insert track. This will insert another video track, and you can then give this one a name. Let's call this one Grunge. Hit enter to confirm. And you can insert as many tracks as you want to. You can also delete tracks or select to rename tracks if you don't want to. And you can do the same with your audio tracks. Simply right click onto an existing audio track, select to insert track. So now we have a second one. Let's maybe call this one music, and maybe we'll right click audio 1 and rename this one to sound effects. So you can kind of give them useful names so you know exactly what is what. You can create as many audio and video tracks as you want to. I think the limit is 64 or something. It's a pretty high number. I doubt you'd be using them all. Now, because I've kind of mutilated my editor timeline, and if I zoom out a little bit, I can see there's other clips at the end. Let me just right click these gaps and go ripple delete. I'll ripple delete this one as well, just so I've got at least a consecutive, a continuous video, even if it doesn't make all that much sense, just a little bit nicer. Now that we have another video track, well, what can we actually do with it? We can actually now start layering videos on top of each other, or visual elements on top of each other. And this is kind of leading into video compositing, which we'll get to once we talk about composite shots. But you can actually do quite a lot of really cool stuff directly in your editor timeline without using any of the advanced features. What I'm going to do is, in my media panel, let's locate the grunge JPEG. Let's grab this and drag this into the editor timeline and just place it on top of all of the other videos. I'm going to snap it to the very beginning. I'm just going to extend it. I'm just going to push it out to maybe the end of the clip, maybe literally to the absolutely end of the project. If you want to go back, either you can use the hand tool and drag, or you can also just use the scroll bar at the bottom to return to the beginning. And well, right now all we see is the grunge image, because the grunge image sits on top of everything else. But remember how we talked about this little horizontal line here, which is the opacity for this layer? So you can return to the selection tool, simply drag this line down to start revealing the image that sits underneath it. So this is fully grunge image, nothing underneath shows through. And you can kind of make this more transparent. However, you still have this ugly white, and it doesn't quite work. Now, HitFilm Express has something called blend modes, and that controls how layers on top of each other are merged together. And right now it's just normal. There's nothing magical about this. You can easily change the blend mode of your layer. Let's select this grunge JPEG image we've placed on the top, right click and go to blend. And in here you'll find a whole bunch of different options for different blend modes. You can, for example, say additive blend mode, and that won't make too much of a difference unless you maybe have a fireball or something that's meant to be bright. Let's right click, go blend. Maybe we'll go with color burn. And this looks much nicer. So now I've got this really grungy, dark edge around the outside of my video. Maybe I'll lower the opacity just a little bit. So kind of adding a little bit of like a really rugged looking vignette to this image. And that actually looks pretty cool. Obviously, you can simply right click on all of these layers and change all sorts of properties. You can also select your layers in your timeline, and over on the left hand side, behind this media panel, remember there's effects and then there's controls. So if you go to controls, right now it shows you I've got this grunge JPEG layer selected. And that one has clip properties, where I can change the blend mode right here. So I can change this to hue or divide. That's actually not too bad either, or darken. But I think I actually did like the color burn better, so I'm just going to leave that. I can change other properties like the transform, for example. I can actually move this image right, left, up, down. I can rescale it and do all sorts of cool stuff in here. So this controls panel really just gives you access to all of the properties on whatever layer you've currently got selected. If you've accidentally changed something and you want to reset it, you can simply right click these properties and select reset. Let's reset the position as well. So kind of back to where we started. Now, one of the things I have not yet mentioned is right now the opacity of this grunge layer is constant because this horizontal line is constant. However, you can actually add animation directly in your editor timeline, and this is also really useful for controlling the volume of your audio. Let's just zoom in just a little bit more, and rather than just dragging this line up or down, you can actually hold down Control, or I believe it'll be Command on the Mac, and click onto this line to place a little point like a keyframe. You can then go over to the right and let's place another one, hold down Control and click onto this line, and you can now bring this up. So now we're essentially creating a little bit of animation where it starts out with no opacity. So right here, the grunge is invisible, and then it starts fading in. And maybe up here towards the end, again, just placing 2 keyframes by holding down Control, I can kind of fade this back out. So I now got control over the visibility of my layers, and I can make them come in and out. I can also do the same for audio, and this is really useful sometimes when you want, like a really dramatic piece of music or sound effect to just kind of slowly come in and then fade away. Simply Control, click onto these volume control bars. just kind of adjust them. So now this sound here will slowly fade in. Maybe I'll move this over to the right a little bit. Again, just place a few and fade this back out. So now I've created this effect of the grunge coming in as well as the audio, and they both fade away at the same time. Let's zoom back out and let's make use of the fact that we've actually added another audio track. We have one for sound effects and one for music. So let's come back to the media panel. Let's come down into our music folder. Let's grab this horror loop here. Let's simply drag and drop this into our music track. And again, because this is an audio file, obviously can't drop it onto any of the video tracks. It has to be an audio track. Let's just drop this right here. You can see the waveform there. It's obviously quite a bit too long. So press C or select the slice tool from the toolbar. C to get to the slice tool. Just kind of click and cut this at the end. V to return to the selection tool. Just kind of select that last tail and press delete. And again, because I don't want this audio to just kind of be cut out there, I'm going to hold down Control and click, and just kind of have this slowly fade out towards the end. And maybe I'll actually lower some of these sound effects on my Walter Garage clips, just because they're more just ambient noise. I'd really be replacing most of these because the audio we recorded on set were actually pretty bad, to be honest. So let's rewind. And let's just play back a small section by pressing space. Very dramatic. One shortcoming, however, is that right now all of our edits are just straight cuts on the timeline. It'll just simply cut from one clip over to the next, and the audio will simply flick from one clip to the next. So in order to make these cuts a little bit more seamless and kind of make them melt and blend together a little bit better, we're now going to look at how to use audio and video transitions. You can find all of the transitions, both for video and for audio, over on the left-hand side. Behind the media panel, you will find the Effects tab. In this tab, you will obviously find a huge amount of really cool effects that we're going to be talking about a little bit later. But the two folders that I want to concentrate on now is Transitions Audio and Transitions Video. Let's pop open the Video Transitions folder first. And in here, you'll find quite a few different options for different types of dissolves and splits and wipes and zooming effects and other ways to blend between two consecutive clips. On our editor timeline, let's just zoom in on one of these edits or one of these cuts. So let's simply zoom in just a little bit right here. So you've got this little cut between these two clips, which right now is pretty much just instantaneous. And in order to apply a transition, simply select it from your effects panel, simply click on it and drag it across. I'm just going to go with the cross dissolve, drag it across and drop it right onto the cut between these two clips. You can see the little green bar telling you where this transition will sit. Let's let go. And there's our little cross dissolve. And now if you scrub through, you can see it cross dissolves, it fades from one to the other. You can select the corners or the edges of this crossfade or any other transition and pull them out or push them in to determine how long this transition will really take. So that looks very dramatic. Obviously, it's really not the right transition for, like a horror movie. This is more a really slow kind of transition, but that's essentially how you apply them. Let's delete this cross dissolve again, return to the effects panel, and maybe I'm going to drag this time. Let's take the fade to color. Let's drag and drop that transition right on this edit or on this cut. I want to make this a little bit shorter. Zip this in a little bit, and now we're just going to it's a little fade to black, and then it comes back. And with this transition selected, it will already have selected the controls panel over on the left-hand side. And in here, you'll find all sorts of settings for these transitions, and they vary depending on what transition you have selected. Fade to color obviously has a color to fade to. So maybe I'm going to pop open this little color selector and change this to red, because why not? Let's hit OK. And now this fade to color will fade to red. Audio transitions work exactly the same way. Let me zoom out just a little bit because I'm fading out this previous clip here. Let me just select these keyframes and make it on the selection tool. You can either move them around or hold down Control and click on an existing keyframe. We'll actually delete them again. I'm just going to delete the last two just so we have some volume for these two clips. And return to the effects panel. Let's come up, collapse the video transitions, and let's expand the audio transitions. And in HitFilm Express, by default, you'll just get the fade transition, which will fade out one and then fade the other one in. So again, simply grab this and drag and drop this on a cut line between two audio clips. And this will now fade across from one audio clip to the next. Now let's have some fun and look at how we can apply video and audio effects to the clips in our timeline. Let's return to the Effects panel, and besides the audio transitions and the video transitions, in HitFilm Express in the Effects panel you will find a large number of different effects. There's categories for audio, 360 video, distortions, generations, keying, light flares, particles, sharpening, a whole bunch of different effects, and all of these are available for free with HitFilm Express. If you do want more effects, you can either purchase those additional add-on packs to add more effects into this list, or you can upgrade to the Pro version. But if you're just starting out, there's a whole ton of cool effects in here, so let's start playing with some of them. Let's first pop open the color grading folder, and maybe we're going to use this hue colorize effect first. In order to apply any effect from this panel to a clip in your timeline, just like with video transitions, simply click and drag them across, and you can now drop these ones because color grading effects are video effects, so I can drop them on any video layer I want. Now, I don't want to drop this on the top layer here because that's just my grunge image, which right now isn't even visible. So instead, I'm going to drag this onto this Walter clip, and notice that my timeline indicator is actually over this clip. So this is exactly what we're seeing in the preview window. So let's drop this effect onto this Walter Garage clip. And immediately in your preview window, you will see this effect applied, and everything's kind of turned a little bit reddish. Over on the left hand side, you will notice that your panel switched over to the Controls panel, where you can edit the properties and effects of your currently selected clip in the timeline. And because we have this clip selected that we've applied the Hue and Colorize effect to, under the Effects tab in the Controls panel, you can now tweak all of these effects. So let's expand this one here. Maybe we'll lower the hue strength a little bit. And again, you can see this update immediately in your preview window. Maybe we'll push the saturation up a little bit. I'm just going to change the hue angle just a little bit. Maybe we're just going to tint this just a little bit greenish, maybe a little bit less strength. And again, just feel free to tweak this in any way that you want. If you have a clip selected that doesn't have any effects, so let's select either the image above or the one on the left, you'll notice that there are no effects on this clip because, again, this will show you the controls for the currently selected clip, or, well, the last selected one really. So on this clip there's nothing. But if we reselect this clip that we applied the Hue Colorize effect to, again, in your Controls panel, you can then see this effect and you can tweak its settings. Let's apply another effect. So let's return to the Effects panel. Maybe let's collapse this color grading. Let's come down a little bit. Maybe let's pop open the Stylize folder. And in here, you can either cartoonize it, embossing effect, finding edges, all sorts of cool stuff. Maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with the oil painting. So again, click and drag this effect onto the clip in your timeline that you want to apply it to. Again, I'm going to apply it to the same clip. Let go. Well, it's a little bit hard to see, and if you do want to zoom in on your preview window, simply scroll up on the mouse wheel, and you can also simply right click and drag around to reposition this preview window, and you can see how everything kind of turned a little bit patchy, like a bit of vector art, well, like an oil painting. Let's come into the Controls panel, which should already be selected, expand the oil painting effect properties, and in here you can now adjust the radius, so you can make it softer or more detailed. Just want a little bit maybe. And again, I can change the level, so that's the number of iterations over this oil painting. The more you add, the more detailed this effect will be. Maybe I'm just going to go with around about 10. But again, I'm really just playing with these to show you how this works. You can also disable these effects simply by ticking this little checkbox here or unchecking it. So let's disable the oil painting effect. So that's what the oil painting effect does. And then the Hue and Colorize just adds that little bit of greenish blue to it. Now, in order to zoom out on your preview window, you either scroll down on the mouse wheel or down here on the bottom right, you can also use this zoom box here. Let's just change this back to scale to fit so we can see our entire clip. And now let's quickly look at the audio effects, and they work exactly the same way. Let's return to the Effects panel, come up, and let's expand this folder for audio effects. In here, you will have a whole number of different effects for pitch shifting, adding echoes, reverbs, balancing or reversing your audio, all sorts of cool little effects that you can apply. Now, obviously, you can't actually drag an audio effect onto a video track or a video clip in your timeline because they apply to the audio. But you can drop these audio effects on any audio clip in your timeline, which obviously does make sense. So let's just drop it on this one here on the left-hand side. And again, in the Controls panel with this audio clip selected, you can then expand the effect. This one here doesn't actually have any settings because it's just reversing that particular audio clip. But if under the effects, for example, we grab this echo effect and drop it onto our Walter Garage audio clip, this one now has some effect settings. I can change the delay, the fallout, number of echoes. Again, just play with these. There's a huge number of really cool effects available for free in HitFilm Express that you can use to tweak both your video and your audio. Just to show you what that audio effect actually did, let's rewind till before the clip that we applied all of these audio effects to. I'm actually going to mute my music track down here, and you can do that simply by clicking on this little speaker icon. So I'm going to mute my music track. I'm just hearing my sound effects track because I really just want to hear this particular clip with the effects. And let's simply come to where this starts and play it back. And that sounds pretty cool. It's really weird because it's reversed and then we've got an echo and a delay on it, so it's a bit of a weird effect, but just play and have some fun. There's a ton of cool stuff that you can do. Next, the most likely thing that you want to do once you're at this stage of the editing process is probably add some titles, like text to appear at the beginning of the video to introduce the characters or at the end for credits. So let's look at how we can create and work with text in HitFilm Express. Let's zoom all the way back out and unselect all of our clips, and you may notice that in the toolbox for this editor timeline, there aren't actually any tools to create any text. Now, to add text overlays into your project, you have two options. Of course, you can simply use an image. For example, right here, we use this little grunge image to overlay onto our video. Let's come back to the media panel, open up this images folder, and I have imported this text overlay PNG, which is a piece of text on a transparent backdrop. Obviously, I can drag and drop that into my timeline. So let's select it and drag it into our timeline. And I don't actually want to drop it on an existing video track. I'm going to pull it up, and this is going to drag it and drop it in a new track. So HitFilm Express will automatically create a new video track for us. Let's let go. There's video track number 3. And we now have this text element placed on top of our image. With this layer selected, you can click in the preview window and reposition this text element. So maybe we'll drag it down here to the bottom left. Let's rewind a little bit, unselect all our layers and play this back. And we now have this text element overlaid onto our video. Now, there's two issues with this approach. For one, this is just an image. The text is baked in. I can't actually change it in HitFilm. I'd have to go into Photoshop and modify the image and then update my image file to change this text. Secondly, the only thing that I can animate in the editor timeline within HitFilm Express for a video layer is the opacity via this little line here. I can come into the controls panel, expand the clip properties, I can change the blend mode, or I can expand the transform and I can change the position property, for example, but I can't animate these properties in here, so I can't have my text swipe in or move around or zoom in or do some of those more funky and cool motion graphic-y effects. In order to create and work with text elements and animate them and create cool motion graphics and more advanced visual effects, HitFilm has the concept of a composite shot. Think of a composite shot as a container for visual elements that are stacked on top of each other. Kind of like what we did in this editor timeline, but the editor timeline is quite limited in how far you can push and you can't actually animate in here. So, in order to create an actual text element and animate it, we first need to create a composite shot. For now, let's simply select this text overlay PNG layer, press delete on your keyboard to delete that. Let's return to the media panel. Let me collapse all of my folders. And now let's create a new composite shot into which we can then add an animated text element. In order to create a composite shot, you can either come up to the top here and press new and then select composite shot, or you can just right click into your media panel, select new composite shot. This is going to bring up the composite shot properties, and first let's give this a useful name. I'm just going to call it title text. Then you can define the template. Every composite shot, just like your main video, has a resolution and a frame rate and a duration. So I'm going to change my template over to 1080p at 24 frames per second. Duration, let's just leave this at 30 seconds, and there's a few other things you can tweak in here. There's a few advanced settings as well. I'm not going to go into those. They're really, well, they're advanced, and this is an absolute beginner tutorial, so don't worry too much about those ones. Simply make sure you've given this a useful name and then hit OK. This has created a new element in our media panel, and this is our composite shot. Over on the right hand side, you will also notice that your timeline changed, and if you look at the top here, you can see there's now two tabs. Right now we're in this title text composite shot, and in here you have a new dedicated timeline for all of the elements that you add into this composite shot. You can simply click back into your editor timeline at any point in time. So this is our editor timeline, and then you can click back into the title text composite shot. If you're in the main editor and you accidentally closed your title text, let's close this by pressing on this little X here. The way to get back into this is simply double click onto the composite shot in your media panel. So let's double click onto the title text. And again, that's just going to pop it up again on the right hand side. Right now in this composite shot we have absolutely nothing, so all we have is a transparent background. The great thing about composite shots is that in here you can create a large number of different layers and blend them all together, apply all sorts of effects and animate everything in a pretty advanced way. And again, we're not going to go all of that advanced. I really just want to create an animated text element, but just so you know that it is available, up on the top in the title text composite shot you will find this button to create a new layer. If you click this, you have the option to create a plane, which is a solid colored layer. You can create text elements, grading layers, which apply any effects that you apply to that grade layer to all of the layers that sit below it. You can also create cameras, lights, and points, which are placeholder objects. So there's a huge amount of things you can do in here. We're not going to touch onto too many, even though we want to create some text. So let's not do any of that. Instead, let's look at the preview panel in the composite shot, and over on the left hand side you will find a number of tools that we didn't have available in our editor timeline. There's a selection tool, a translate tool, there's now also a text tool and some tools for masking, which again is a little bit more of an advanced topic, not going to touch on that. Let's simply click onto this text tool, click into the preview window. This is going to pop open the text properties, and these ones aren't that important, we can tweak them on the fly. Simply hit OK, and you want to make sure that this little text box that we've created is blue. Right now, some selection didn't quite work, so let's double click into this text box to make sure it's nice and blue, and then you can simply start typing some text. Now, because we left this text layer at the default properties of 400 by 400 pixels, the text is now getting wrapped, and if you don't want that, you can simply click onto the bottom right corner of this text box and just drag that to rescale your text box. You can also return to the selection tool, and then you can drag and reposition your text. And now we can finally make use of that little text panel in the bottom left hand side. Remember, up here on the right hand side you'll find this little text tab. If you now select this text tab with this text layer selected in your composite shot, you can actually make changes to this, and this will affect your text. However, let's click on this bar here and drag to the right, and even though we're changing our text size, the text isn't actually changing, and that is because in order to change the actual properties of the text itself needs to be selected, not just the text layer. In order to do that, let's return to the text tool and let's click and drag to highlight the text inside of our text box. And now if we increase the size and maybe let's change the color to red, now we're actually changing this text, and because it's wrapping again, I'm just going to click onto the bottom right corner and just make this just a little bit bigger. Return to the selection tool and just position this down here. And you can now scrub through your composite shot, and well, nothing will animate because we haven't added any animation to this text just yet. Now this step is important. With the text layer selected, let's select the controls tab on the left hand side. Let's expand the transform, and this does look slightly different than what it did on the editor timeline. For one, you have the ordering is a little bit different, which I don't understand why that is, but each of these properties now has a big round hollow circle on the left hand side, and this indicates that you can actually animate these properties. In your composite shot, make sure you're at the very beginning, and what we're going to do is we're going to have this text start out on the left hand side here off screen, then slide into the screen, and then vanish back off to the left. In order to do that, make sure you're at the very beginning of your composite shot, come into the controls tab, and in the transform properties for this text layer, click on this hollow icon next to the position. This is going to turn blue and have a dot in the middle, indicating that we now have keyframes enabled, and at our current cursor position there is an actual keyframe on this property. You can also see this in the layers for the composite shot. You can expand the text layer, expand the transform, and in here you have this position property, which again has this filled blue circle on the left hand side, indicating it is animated and it has a keyframe. And on the timeline itself, you'll find this little gray diamond, which indicates there's a keyframe on this property. Now, at this point in time, I don't want my text to be visible. I want it to be off to the left hand side. And you can either drag this here in the preview window, but because you may accidentally move it up or down, let's undo that with Ctrl Z. I'm actually just going to change the X position and just drag this to the left to move the text all the way off screen. Now let's move forward to maybe about a second in, and the time up here indicates I'm now at 1 second and 3 frames in on this composite shot. And note that while the hollow circle on the position is blue, it doesn't have a dot on the middle because right now at this position there is no keyframe. But if we now click and drag on the X position and drag this to the right to bring our text back into the screen, this will create a new keyframe at the current cursor position. Let me zoom in just a little bit so this becomes a little bit easier to see. And now if you scrub back through your composite shot, you can see the text animate from off-screen to on-screen due to these keyframes. Let's zoom back out just a little bit. Maybe we'll go to about 5 seconds. And then you can either copy and paste this keyframe to the current cursor location, or at the top between these two arrows here, you'll find this little dotted circle. And this is essentially toggling keyframes on or off. So you can add or remove a keyframe at the current position. I want to add one. Let's move forward about a second. And let's again move this text off screen to the left. So now at the end, the text moves off to the left again. Let's rewind and simply press space to play back this composite shot. Cool, that looks pretty good. Finally, to make this look just a little bit nicer, let's enable motion blur on this moving element. So it just adds a little bit of blur as the element comes in and out, and it'll just look a little bit more natural. For that, let's collapse the layer because we're done animating the position property. And over on the right hand side, you'll find this little blurred ball kind of icon. Let's tick that to enable motion blur on this layer. So now as the layer moves, it gets this really nice motion blur. Let's rewind and play this back by pressing space. Cool, I'd say that looks pretty good. So now, how do we actually get this composite shot into our editor timeline so it actually sits on top of our video? Well, let's return to the media panel, and a composite shot is essentially just video, right? And like any other video that you have in your project, you can simply drag and drop it into your editor timeline. So let's simply click and drag this layer over into our editor timeline. You can see it's going to add a new video, but you can also see at the bottom, it actually has an audio track as well, because when we created this composite shot, we set to also have an audio track. Now you can disable that if you don't want to, but for now I'm not going to worry too much. So I'm simply going to drop this right in there. So here's my composite shot. What I might actually do, because I know it doesn't actually have anything in this audio track, and this is kind of cluttering up my editor timeline. With this clip selected, simply right click, select unlink, unselect everything and select only the audio track, press delete to just delete that. And I'm actually also going to right click onto this new audio 3 track and just select to delete the track. So this keeps my timeline just a little bit neater. Also, once the text vanishes off the screen, I know there's nothing else at the end of this composite shot. So let's press C to select the slice tool, click, press V for the selection tool and select this end tail and just delete that. Because we just don't need it. I want to keep my timeline nice and neat. And let's rewind and play back our water in the garage effect with that nice animated title coming in. Cool! Now, it's not quite ready for the Cannes Film Festival, but hopefully this gives you a good idea of how to put together a video, add transitions and effects, and then add some animated titles to really spice up your final project. The last thing we need to talk about is how to now export this project into an actual video file. For that, the first thing we need to look at is your in-out area. Let me zoom out some more, and I have already adjusted this a little bit. In your editor timeline, you will see this highlighted gray area. This defines your in-out area, and you can actually click and drag these start and end points of this highlighted area to define the in and out points of your project. When you export your video, this is usually the area that you will export, and if you were to export this now, you would essentially just export black video because there's nothing here. So you essentially want to make sure that this area starts right where your video starts and ends right where your video ends. Now, because this doesn't snap to the end, let me just pull this over to the right hand side. The easiest way to make sure that this in-out area matches your contents is simply to right click and select Set to Contents. This is going to snap the area to encompass just the contents of your editor timeline, and you're ready for export. On the left hand side in your editor timeline, at the very bottom, we touched on this very briefly, are 2 buttons. The top one says to export contents, which will actually automatically only export the areas of your timeline that contain video or audio material. And below that, you'll find export in-out area. Because we have set the in-out area to be our contents, both of these will do exactly the same right now. Let's just press the top one and say export contents. And HitFilm will add the editor timeline to your export queue. You can now go to the export queue, or you can continue editing because you can actually add multiple elements to the export queue and just export them all at once. However, we really just have one thing to export, so let's simply click Go to Export to jump to the export queue. The export queue is divided into 2 panels. On the left hand side you have the actual queue. This is a list of all of the items that you're going to export from your project. You can scroll over to the right hand side, you can find a progress indicator as well. Right now we haven't started exporting this element just yet. Over on the right hand side you'll find a list of presets that you can apply to the elements in your queue. Let's come back to the left hand side of the queue. In order to apply any of these presets to the elements in your export queue, simply click and drag that preset and drop it onto the element in your export queue. And this has now been changed to the Vimeo 1080p HD preset. It shows you the duration of the clip that you're going to export. So this is just good for sanity checking. Make sure you're actually exporting the parts of your video that you do want to export. Over on the right hand side, you will find the output. So you can simply click on that and select a place and a name for your file to export to. Let's just call this tutorial.mp4. Hit save. And then at the bottom of the export queue, you'll find a little play icon saying start exporting. Press this button to start exporting all of the elements in your queue. You can now see the progress going on, and once this hits 100%, you will have exported your first project from HitFilm Express. Once that's done, simply navigate to the Explorer or Finder window where you've exported your file to, and you can now play this file back, upload it to the internet, or share it with friends and family. Coming back to the export queue, you may think that the list of presets seems rather limited. However, you can simply right-click any of these presets and edit them. You can also create new presets that you can customize in any way that you want. For that, either just right-click into the presets, or at the bottom you've got this new presets button, and then simply go create preset, and you can create a preset for an MP4, an image sequence, or an AVI. Be careful with the AVIs, they're usually uncompressed and turn into huge files. Personally, I prefer using MP4s or MOVs because I can use the H.264 compression. So let's create a new preset for an MP4 format. In the export preset settings, let's give this a useful name like I love HitFilm. And then you can change anything about this preset like the resolution, your aspect ratio, frame rates, and most importantly, probably the target and the max bit rate. The higher you pump these values up, the higher the output quality of your video will be, but this will also make your file bigger, so you may have to play with this to find a nice balance between quality and size. Personally, I usually leave these on around about 20 megabits per second, and then you can also define how your audio is encoded. Hit OK. This will create a new preset in your presets list, and you can then simply drag and drop that onto the element in your queue. Right now, I can't actually drop this onto this element because I have already exported my editor timeline. But what I can do, let's let go, come over to the left hand side, right click this element in the queue and say duplicate the task. So this is going to create a new task to export the exact same editor timeline we exported before. But this one hasn't actually been finished yet. So it's been renamed to tutorial 2, and you can call this whatever you want. I'm actually fine with this. Hit save. Let's drag the I Love HitFilm preset onto that. Let go. And now if you hit start exporting, this editor timeline is going to be exported with our custom I Love HitFilm preset. Now I do apologize for this horrendously long tutorial, and do let me know down below whether you actually made it this far. I'm really curious to know who actually watches my videos all the way through. Also, I am planning to make a follow-up video for this one to answer any questions that you may have, anything you feel I didn't cover properly or problems you're having, leave them down in the comment section down below. I really wanted to create a tutorial that explains all of the basics for HitFilm Express, so you watch that one video and you know as much as you need to get started and start to create your own cool film projects. But now my voice is starting to get pretty tired, so let's get to the outro. And that's all there is to it. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button. And as always, if you do have any comments, questions or suggestions, just leave them down in the section below. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I will see you later.